The log entry was short. Fleet Commander Ro Vassi dictated it the same way he dictated all of them, without looking up from his meal. Standard annexation run. Target designation, Sol system, third planet, local name Earth. Category 3 classification, primitive nuclear capability. No FTL on record. Expect full compliance within 6 standard hours of first contact. Nothing unusual anticipated. He closed the log and kept eating. That was how it started. Not with fire, not with drums, with a bored officer eating his dinner and expecting nothing interesting to happen. The Dominion fleet came out of FTL in tight formation. 42 ships, cruisers, destroyers, 2 carrier-class vessels, and 1 command ship, Vassi's own. They dropped into real space at the edge of the Sol system like a fist setting itself down on a table. Slow, deliberate, heavy with intention. The fleet's broadcast array opened automatically. The annexation signal went out on all frequencies, a recorded message, played thousands of times across hundreds of worlds. It listed the Dominion's authority, the terms of integration, and the expected response window. 12 hours to reply. After that, the fleet would move in. Vassi leaned back in his seat and waited. The reply came in 4 minutes. Not a surrender, not a plea, not silence. It was a calm, professional voice, speaking in clean Dominion standard, with only a faint accent that none of the translation systems could quite place. Dominion Fleet, this is Earth Orbital Traffic Control. We have received your signal. Please hold your current position outside the designated boundary marker at 2.1 astronomical units from the primary star. A formal response is being prepared by the Unified Planetary Defense Council. You will receive it within 2 standard hours. Thank you for your patience. Then the channel closed. Vassi stared at the speaker panel for a moment. Then he looked at his communications officer. The officer looked back at him with the same expression somewhere between confused and faintly amused. They said thank you, the officer said. I heard what they said. Outside the fleet, a single Earth patrol ship appeared from behind one of the outer planet's moons. Small, lightly armed by the look of it. It moved toward the Dominion formation at a steady, unhurried pace and settled into a loose parallel course alongside the lead destroyer. Inside that ship, pilot Danny Sow ran her checks with one hand and reached for her thermos with the other. She opened the channel to the destroyer. Dominion vessel, this is Terran Patrol Ship 7. I am your escort during the hold period. If your crew needs anything, let me know. I also have 2 liters of very good coffee on board if your replicators are running low. A long pause, then a voice carefully formal. We do not require supplies at this time. Danny nodded. Understood, offer stands, clean entry by the way. She closed the channel and sipped her coffee. Aboard the command ship, Envoy Orin had been watching the exchange on a side screen. She was the Dominion's political representative, the one who handled the paperwork after Vassi's fleet made the locals understand there was no other option. She had done this on 11 worlds. She knew how they reacted. Fear, mostly. Sometimes anger that collapsed into fear. Sometimes silence that meant the same thing. She had never seen traffic control thank them. She pulled up the intelligence file on Earth. It was 63 years old. It described a fractured planet of competing nations with crude orbital capability. The last notation read, unlikely to present organized resistance. Orin looked at the patrol ship packing the fleet on the view screen. The pilot flew like someone on a routine errand. No tension, no fear in the flight pattern at all. She flagged the file for urgent review. On Earth, Nora Vance read the annexation notice out loud to the 12 people at the table. Every line, every demand. When she finished, she set it down. Nobody panicked. One man poured water. A woman wrote something in a notebook. Vance said, send the standard reply. Her assistant nodded and left the room. 3 minutes later, the Dominion fleet received a second message from Earth. It was not a surrender. It was a single, formally worded document. It acknowledged receipt of the Dominion's annexation signal. It referenced 3 specific articles of interstellar sovereign territory law, laws the Dominion itself had written into the Galactic Charter 60 years ago, before Earth had ever been contacted. It stated, plainly and without hostility, that Earth and all Terran systems were sovereign territory under those laws. It stated that the Dominion fleet was currently positioned in violation of a recognized boundary. And then it said, all Dominion vessels are required to withdraw beyond the boundary marker within 48 standard hours or be formally considered in violation of Terran space law. This notice is filed with the Galactic Charter Registry. A copy has been transmitted to all registered neutral parties currently monitoring this system. At the bottom, in the space where most worlds put their surrender terms or their begging, Earth had put a single line. We are prepared to discuss all matters through proper legal channels at your convenience. Vassi read it twice. Then he laughed. It was a short laugh, the kind that covered something else. Across the table, Orin did not laugh. She pulled the document up on her own screen and read it a third time slowly. Outside, the little patrol ship was still flying alongside them, patient, unhurried, like it had nowhere else to be and all the time in the world. She did not like that. The intelligence file on Earth had a cover sheet stamped with the Dominion's gold seal. Underneath the seal, in small print, was a date. Tala Orin stared at that date for a long time. 63 years. The last time anyone in the Dominion had bothered to look closely at this planet was 63 years ago, when Earth had no ships past its own moon, and was still arguing with itself about whether other life in the galaxy existed. She requested an updated scan from the fleet's long-range sensors. What came back made her sit down. There were structures on the far side of the system that were not on any Dominion chart. Deep space platforms, dark and cold, and built to be hard to see. Relay stations tucked behind asteroid fields. Tracks in the sensor data that suggested regular, heavy traffic moving through routes that had been deliberately kept off the open galactic registry. Earth had not been sleeping. Earth had been working quietly for a very long time. She pulled up the scan data a second time and started counting. The platforms were old. Some of them had been out there for at least 40 years, maybe more. That meant Earth had started building its deep space network before the Dominion had even formally noticed the planet existed, which meant one of 2 things. Either Earth had developed FTL capability independently and very early, or someone had helped them. Either way, the intelligence file was not just outdated. It was a fiction. Orin went to find Vassi. She found him in the briefing room, standing over a table with 3 of his senior officers, pointing at a route map. He was explaining how the fleet would approach Earth orbit once the hold period ended. He was talking about timing and angles and which defensive positions to occupy first. He was planning a landing, not a battle. He was planning the way he always planned these things, assuming the other side would do what the other side always did. She put the sensor report on the table in front of him. He looked at it, he looked at her, he looked back at the report. When were these built? He asked. The oldest structures appear to be around 40 years old, she said. The most recent were completed less than 6 months ago. One of the officers pointed at a cluster of readings near the outer planets. Those look like weapons platforms. They are, Orin said. Vassi was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up the report and handed it back to her. The fleet has 42 ships. Whatever they have built out here, it does not change the math. It changes it considerably, Orin said. We do not know what those platforms are armed with. We do not know what their fleet strength actually is. We have no current data. We have enough data, Vassi said, and went back to his map. Orin left the briefing room. She went back to her cabin and opened her personal notes. 11 worlds, 11 annexations. None of them had ever been calm. Every single world at the moment of First Dominion contact had shown some form of distress. Elevated communications traffic, civilian broadcasts changing in tone, military chatter spiking. Even the worlds that eventually surrendered without a fight had panicked first. Earth's traffic was completely normal, commercial ships still running their routes, civilian broadcasts about weather and sports and the price of food. The Defense Council meeting she had picked up on a passive scan had lasted 45 minutes, and then people had gone home for dinner. She opened a new file and started writing a detailed report for Dominion High Command. She was still writing when the alert came. Not a hostile alert, just a notification from the sensor array. The patrol ship pilot Sau's ship had been joined by 3 more Earth vessels, all the same class, all running the same loose escort pattern around the fleet. They had appeared from different directions, from different distances, all arriving within a 20-minute window. No coordination visible on any open channel, which meant they were coordinating on a channel the Dominion could not read. Orin added that to her report. Far out beyond the outer planets, Elder Gan sat in the narrow observation deck of his neutral transit vessel and watched the whole thing on his sensor screen. He was very old, and he had seen things that most people in the galaxy had not. He had been present at 3 Dominion annexations. He had watched the process from the outside, the fleet arriving, the local government collapsing inward, the Dominion administrators landing, the flag going up. He had a grandson who had grown up under Dominion rule. He had a daughter who remembered the day before it. He watched Earth's patrol ships circling the fleet like they were escorting guests rather than facing invaders. He watched the sensor ghosts of the deep space platforms sitting silent and patient at the edge of the system. He ran his own scan and found 3 more structures the Dominion scans had probably missed, because he knew what to look for and he was not in any hurry. He poured a cup of his own tea and stayed where he was. The 48-hour window was ticking down. Somewhere on that small blue planet, people were going about their evening, cooking dinner, putting children to sleep, looking up at their sky maybe. He wondered what they felt when they looked up right now, knowing what was out here. He suspected they felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He could not quite name it, but it looked, from the outside, a great deal like certainty. The 48 hours ended at exactly the time Earth said they would. There was no countdown on the Dominion screens, no alarm, just the moment passing and then the silence after it and then the hail from Earth. It came in on every channel at once. Nora Vance appeared on the view screen in Vassie's command room. She was sitting at a plain table, no flags behind her, no military officers visible, just a woman in a dark jacket with a sheet of paper in front of her, looking directly at the camera. She looked like someone about to chair a committee meeting. Vassie had expected many things, but not that. She did not introduce herself. She did not ask if they were listening. She simply began. This message is addressed to the Dominion fleet currently holding position at 2.1 astronomical units from our star. It is also being transmitted simultaneously to every registered neutral party, independent system, and charter observer in this quadrant of the galaxy. We transmit it openly because what we say here, we say to everyone. She looked down briefly at her paper, then back up. Earth is sovereign. The Terran systems are sovereign. This is not a claim we are making today. It is a fact that has been true for as long as our world has existed, and it will remain true after this fleet is gone. The Galactic Dominion has the right to govern its own member worlds. It does not have the right to govern ours. We are not a member world. We have never agreed to be a member world. We have never signed, ratified, or accepted any treaty that transfers authority over Terran space to any outside body. Vassie opened his mouth. His communications officer raised a hand. The channel was broadcast, only right now. Earth had sent it as a transmission, not a dialogue. The Dominion's own charter, Vance continued, which we have read in full, recognizes the sovereignty of any system that can demonstrate organized self-governance, independent defense capability, and active participation in galactic civil law. We meet all three conditions. We have the documentation ready for any legal review. We invite that review. What we do not invite is the assumption that our sovereignty ends where the Dominion's ambition begins. She paused just for a moment. Any Dominion vessel that crosses the boundary marker at 2.1 astronomical units without explicit Terran permission will be considered an unauthorized military incursion into sovereign territory. We will respond accordingly. We do not want to do that. We want the fleet to turn around, go home, and begin proper diplomatic contact through the legal channels that exist for exactly this purpose. That is what we want. But what we want and what we are prepared for are two different things. The transmission ended. The command room was quiet. Then Vassi laughed. It came out harder and shorter than he intended. He turned to his tactical officer. "Move us in. Standard approach formation. If they fire, we respond with full force." "Commander," Orin's voice was flat. The transmission went to every neutral party in the quadrant, every independent system, every charter observer. If we move in now and there is a fight, it is on record. Every word she said is on record. Then we win quickly, and the record shows a short engagement. The fleet began to move. On sensors, something changed. It did not happen dramatically. There was no great reveal, no sudden blaze of lights. The weapons platforms simply became active. One by one, across the outer system, the structures that had been sitting cold and silent for 40 years stopped pretending to be rocks and debris and powered up. Their targeting arrays swept across the Dominion fleet in a single coordinated pass. The fleet slowed. Vassi was watching his tactical board. The numbers were not what he had expected, not even close. The platforms alone outmassed half his fleet in raw firepower, and that was before accounting for the Earthships that had appeared from behind the gas giant and the inner asteroid belt, and were now holding position in a loose defensive grid between the fleet and the inner system. He had 42 ships. He was counting Earth's response and reaching a number he did not like. "Hold," he said. The fleet held. Then Orin's console chimed. A private channel request from Earth, not a broadcast, a direct personal channel addressed specifically to her by name and title. She answered it. Vance was still at the same table, still with the same calm expression. She said, "Envoy Orin, I would like to speak with you directly. Not to negotiate, I want to be clear about that. We are not negotiating our sovereignty. But I think it would be useful for you to hear some things, and I would like to hear some things from you before anyone does something that cannot be undone. Will you speak with me?" Orin looked at Vassi. He was still staring at the tactical board. She said, "Yes." "I only ask one thing," Vance said. "The fleet stops moving while we talk." Orin covered her mic. "Vassi, stop the fleet." He turned. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the tactical board again, at the numbers that were not what he had planned for, and he said one word to his helm officer. "Hold." The fleet stopped. Orin opened the channel again. "The fleet is holding, Director." Vance nodded once. "Thank you, let us talk." Out past the outer planets, Elder Gan was writing in the small book he kept for moments history might want recorded. He wrote the time, the fleet position, and one sentence of his own. They held the line without firing a single shot. He put the pen down and watched. The conversation between Orin and Vance lasted 3 hours. Vassi spent most of it walking a short loop around the command room, back and forth, back and forth. His officers pretended to study their screens. Nobody said anything to him because nobody wanted to be the one he looked at when he finally stopped walking. He stopped walking when Orin closed the channel. "Well," he said. "She will not negotiate sovereignty," Orin said. "On anything else, trade routes, communications agreements, mutual assistance protocols. She says Earth is open to formal talks, but not under the current circumstances. She wants the fleet withdrawn first. That will not happen. I know. So we are done talking. Orin looked at him. I think we should consider. We are done talking, Vassi said. He went to his tactical officer and spoke quietly for a few minutes. The officer nodded and began entering commands. Vassi returned to the center of the room and stood with his hands behind his back and watched the screens. 3 destroyers broke from the main fleet formation. Not the full force, just 3 ships. Vassi was not a reckless man. He had simply decided that the data he had was insufficient, and the best way to improve it was to see how Earth responded to a limited incursion. If they hit hard, he would know their weapons were real. If they hesitated, he would know the platforms were bluster. He was about to find out which one it was. The 3 destroyers crossed the boundary marker at 2.1 AU. What happened next took 6 minutes. The destroyers entered a corridor between 2 of the outer weapons platforms. On the Dominion sensors it looked like a gap, a route through the defensive grid. Vassi had picked it himself, but the corridor was not a gap. It was a prepared lane, shaped and sized for exactly the class of vessel the destroyers represented, with overlapping fields of fire from 4 platforms that had gone dark again after the initial activation, and were therefore not showing on the fleet's updated scans. The destroyers were hit simultaneously. Not with anything designed to destroy them, the shots were precise and targeted at drive systems, weapons arrays, and communications. 3 shots per ship, 9 shots total. Every one of them hit. The destroyers went dark and drifting in under 2 minutes. The whole engagement, from crossing the line to the last shot, lasted less time than it took Vassi to understand what he was watching. He stared at the screen. 3 of his ships, dark and cold, drifting in Terran space. Then something else happened. Small ships came out from the inner system. Fast, maneuverable craft that moved like nothing in the Dominion's standard catalog. They matched velocity with the drifting destroyers and latched on with boarding lines. Not weapons deployment. Rescue. They are boarding my ships, Vassi said. No, Orin said, watching the same screen. They are recovering your crews. She was right. The small Earth ships were not capturing the destroyers. They were not stripping them for technology. They were going in through emergency hatches and pulling people out. Crew members in survival suits were being guided across boarding lines to the Earth vessels. They were being helped, not handled. One feed from a long-range visual scan showed an Earth crew member wrapping a thermal blanket around a Dominion soldier who was clearly disoriented. 4 hours later, 3 escape pods were launched from the Earth side of the boundary. They drifted back across the line into Dominion space. Each one carried a portion of the captured crew in full health. Each pod contained a medical kit, food supplies, and a water unit. Each pod also carried a data chip with a short message, the same message on all 3. The message said, "Your crew members were treated for minor injuries and are in good condition. We do not want your people. We do not want a war. We want your fleet to leave. The 3 ships have been placed in a stable orbit and will be released when the fleet withdraws. They have not been boarded for intelligence purposes. Their logs and systems are intact. Please take care of your people." Vassi read the message once. He put it down. He picked it up and read it again. He stood very still for a long time. The command room was completely quiet. Then his communications array lit up. Neutral parties had been watching on passive scan. They had seen the whole thing. The engagement, the recovery, the pod return. Signals were going out across the quadrant, not from Earth, from everyone else who had been watching. Orin's personal console chimed, a message from Elder Gan. She had not spoken to him directly in years. The message was short. "I have watched the Dominion take 40 worlds in my lifetime. I have never seen a captured crew returned alive and unharmed. I have never seen the enemy given their ships back. Think carefully about what you are going to do next, Envoy. Not for Earth's sake, for your own." She read it twice. Then she walked across the command room to where Vassi was standing and she said, quietly, so that only he could hear. They disabled 3 ships without destroying them. They returned every crew member in better condition than they were captured. They gave back the ships. They filmed all of it and let the whole quadrant watch. Whatever you do next will be watched just as closely. And everyone watching already knows what they just saw. Vassi said nothing. They are not trying to beat us, Orin said. They are trying to make beating them cost more than it is worth. Vassi still said nothing. But he did not order another probe. The neutral station was small and old, parked at a Lagrange point between 2 of the outer planets. It belonged to nobody in particular, which was exactly why both sides agreed to use it. Orin arrived first. She came alone, as agreed. No weapons visible, though she had a small personal unit tucked into her jacket that she suspected Vance already knew about and had decided not to mention. She walked through the station's main corridor, which smelled like recycled air and old metal, and found the meeting room at the far end a plain space with 2 chairs, a table, and a viewport that looked out at nothing in particular except stars. Vance was already there. That was the first surprise. The agreement had been that they would arrive at the same time, but Vance had come early and was sitting in one of the chairs reading something on a handheld screen, comfortable in the silence, not performing patience but simply being patient. She looked up when Orin entered, set the screen face down on the table and said, "Thank you for coming." They sat. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Orin said, "I want to understand something. Genuinely. Every world the Dominion has integrated, some of them were strong. Some of them had real military capability. They all calculated the cost of resistance against the cost of compliance, and they all reached the same answer. Why is Earth's calculation different?" Vance thought about this. "Because we are not calculating the same thing they were," she said finally. "Those worlds asked, 'Can we win?' We asked a different question. Which was, what does it cost to stop being who we are?" Orin waited. "The Dominion offers order," Vance said. "Infrastructure, protection from outside threats. We understand the offer. It is a real offer. We are not pretending it has no value. But the price is that someone else decides. Someone else sets the rules for our trade, our movement, our laws, our future. And that price for us, specifically, for a species that spent most of its history fighting over the right to decide its own fate, that price is not payable. It is not something we can agree to and still be ourselves." Orin said nothing for a moment. Outside the viewport, nothing moved. "Other species feel that way too," Orin said carefully. "They still joined." "Some of them had no real choice," Vance said. "Some chose survival over identity, but we had time. We saw you coming a long time before you arrived, and we used that time. And now we are at a point where we do not have to make that trade." "You could still lose," Orin said. "A full Dominion mobilization would cost the Dominion more than this system is worth," Vance said. "We know that. You know that. That is why we built what we built and positioned it where we positioned it. We are not trying to defeat the Dominion in open war. We are trying to make the math come out wrong for the Dominion every time it looks at us." They were quiet again. Then Orin said, "What happens to worlds like mine, the ones already inside the Dominion?" Vance looked at her directly. "That is not our fight to fight for them, but they can see what is happening here. They can see that it is possible to say no. We cannot give them freedom, but maybe we can give them the idea that it exists." On Terran Station 4, Danny Sao was walking 6 Dominion crew members through the public areas, a quiet gesture of goodwill, a look at what ordinary human life actually looked like. The station was busy. People moved past them with groceries, with children, with arguments about something on a screen in a corner bar. Nobody stared at the Dominion visitors. A few people nodded. One old man told them they had picked a good week to visit because the fish market was running a special. One of the Dominion soldiers, young, with a careful expression that was slowly loosening into something more honest, looked at Danny and said, "You are not afraid of us." Danny said, "Should I be?" The soldier thought about it. "Where I come from, when we see a Dominion fleet, people stay inside." "Here too," Danny said, "for about a day. Then people got bored and went back to work." She paused at a window that looked out at the docking ring. "I think it's because we'd been expecting you for a while. Hard to be terrified of something you've had time to plan for." The soldier looked at the window and was quiet for a long time. Finally he said, "What is it like, deciding things for yourselves?" Danny looked at him, then back at the window. "Loud," she said. "Frustrating, we argue about everything, constantly." A pause. "Worth it, though." Elder Gan, watching the station's public feed through a passive link he was not technically supposed to have, watched the soldier standing at the window. He had grandchildren that age. He opened a channel to his homeworld, encrypted, routed through 3 neutral relays. He kept it short. "Tell the council I have something to report. Tell them it is important. Tell them there is a word I found in Earth's oldest records. It is a word for what one world just did to the largest empire in this part of the galaxy. The word is defiance, and I think we should talk about it." He sent the message before he could change his mind. Then he sat back and waited, for the first time in a long time, with something close to hope. The order from Dominion High Command arrived at 3:40 fleet time. Vassie was not sleeping. He had not slept properly since the destroyers went dark. He was in his command chair, in the dim light of a ship running on night cycle power, when the priority signal came through. He read it once on his personal screen with the brightness turned down low so nobody else in the room could see it from across their stations. He read it again. The order was not what he had expected. He had expected reinforcements, or at minimum a strongly worded authorization to escalate. What he received was a cold, precise political calculation laid out in the formal language of Dominion High Command. The annexation of the Sol system was to be suspended indefinitely. The fleet was to withdraw to the pre-contact staging point. A full review of the operation would be conducted. Vassie was to prepare a comprehensive report. Between the formal lines, the meaning was clear. The engagement had been watched by too many neutral parties. The returned crews and the undestroyed ships had been seen by too many independent systems. The Dominion's political apparatus had run the numbers and found that a prolonged, public, and visibly difficult campaign against a single sovereign world, one that was clearly prepared, clearly capable, and clearly not going to stop, would cost more in political standing and galactic reputation than the Sol system would ever produce in tribute and resources. Earth was not worth the damage. The Dominion was going to leave. Vassie sat with that knowledge for a long time. The command room was quiet around him. The night cycle skeleton crew moved softly at their stations. Through the main viewport, the Sol system's distant sun was a brighter star than the others, warm-colored, small, patient. He thought about the 42 worlds he had helped annex, how easy most of them had been, and about how this one small blue world, listed in the files as primitive and unorganized, had made him sit in the dark reading a retreat order. At 600 he called his officers together. He read the order, answered 3 questions, and went to his cabin. Orin was the one who opened the channel to Earth. Vance appeared on screen, the same plain table, the same composed expression. It was early morning in the region of Earth where Vance was sitting, light coming in from somewhere off-screen, pale and clean. Orin said, "The fleet will begin withdrawal in 2 hours. The 3 disabled destroyers will be collected as we depart. We accept Earth's terms regarding their return." She paused. "I want to say one more thing, and it is not official." Vance waited. "What you said in the meeting," Orin said, "about the cost of stopping being who you are. I have been thinking about it since. I think it is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time." Vance looked at her for a moment. "I hope you get to think about it somewhere comfortable." Orin closed the channel. 2 hours later, the Dominion fleet moved. It turned slowly and began the long transit to the FTL jump point. It took most of the morning. There was no ceremony on Earth, no broadcast announcement, no public celebration. The Defense Council filed the relevant reports and updated the sovereign boundary status from active alert to standard monitoring. Nora Vance walked out of the building where she had spent the last 4 days and stood in the cold air for a few minutes with her coat buttoned up and her hands in her pockets. The mountains behind the city were white. The sky was a pale, clear blue. Someone on her staff asked if they should issue a public statement. She thought about it and said, "Just update the registry, people will notice." They did notice, quietly at first, then more broadly. The news spread the way important things do, slowly, seriously. In the days that followed, independent systems sent formal messages to Earth. Some were short, some were long. A few were from worlds inside the Dominion that had technically no business communicating directly with a non-member system, but sent messages anyway through channels the Dominion would notice only if it was looking carefully. Elder Gan's Homeworld Council sent their reply to his encrypted message 3 days after the fleet withdrew. The reply was brief and very careful, as all official communications from Cathari had to be. But between the formal sentences, the meaning was there. They wanted to talk. Gan replied immediately, from his observation post that still had a clear sensor line to the now empty coordinates where 42 Dominion ships had held position. He wrote for a long time. He wrote about what he had seen, not just the weapons platforms and the disabled destroyers and the returned crews, but the patrol pilot who offered coffee, and the tour of the station where an ordinary man told Dominion visitors the fish market was having a sale, and the soldier standing at the window asking what it was like to decide things for yourself. The answer had been, loud, frustrating, worth it. He filed the message and sat back. Danny Sow was on patrol. The same route as always, the same stretch of outer system space, the same stars in the same positions. Her ship moved through the silence at standard speed. Nothing around her but distance and light. The boundary marker sat at 2.1 AU, the same as it always had, a number in the navigation system that meant this far and no further. She passed it on the outer edge of her loop and curved back toward home. The system was quiet, the line held, the work continued. That was enough.